Fuck. What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to Alex Runs. This week I had a pretty unique opportunity. My wife's coworker asked me to make him a training plan for his first half marathon, and so I've made a bunch over the past for my previous races, and I figured, like, why not make a video out of it so you guys can see like everything that goes into training for a half marathon or a full marathon, all things you got to be aware of, and how to make your own training plan. Let's get right into it. Alright, sick. So as you guys can see, I already put everything together. I was gonna make the video start out with me like building this whole thing, but then I realized it'd be super long and I don't want to keep you guys here forever, so built it all already, and I'm just gonna go through everything that you want to keep in mind when you're training for your first half marathon race, and all the stuff that I put in here, and kind of go through and explain everything. So yeah, as you can see, this guy's name is Jay. He asked me to make him a 2 months training plan, and from what I understand, like, he's relatively like new runner, hasn't been running too much, just more casually or whatever. So in my opinion, like, can you do a half marathon in 2 months? Absolutely. Can you do a full marathon in 2 months? Probably can as well, but definitely not recommended. You can definitely get some overuse injuries. And so I built this around 3 months, which I think would be like the bare minimum if I had like a beginner who was casually running before. That's how long I would give them. Another thing too is that he hasn't picked out his half marathon race yet. So as you can see there in the race title, there is none because he hasn't picked one out yet. So I just built him basically a 3 month training plan, and then from there I can go back in and adjust it later when he actually picks a race. He also did not pick a half marathon goal time, so I just said like sub 2:30 as a beginner. I feel like it's a pretty realistic thing if you've been casually running before and now you want to take running more seriously. So I feel like it's a pretty good goal, and that could obviously be adjusted depending on your skill level and stuff like that. But yeah, so let's get right into all this stuff here. Where do I even start? So if you're a beginner runner who's just been casually running, like no schedule, just get out there when you can, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how can I get myself set up to train for half marathon? The biggest thing initially is just that you have to consistently run, and you have to consistently run and add volume over time. That's the biggest thing if you just want to finish the race. And that's basically what his goal is. He just wants to finish the race. So we can kind of start there. So since he's, like I said, casual runner, now wanting to train for half marathon, I set the frequency of the runs to be 3 days a week. I feel like this is super realistic for anybody that's just getting into running or is casual running before, getting into running now. 3 days a week gives you 3 out of the 7 days of the week of running, gives you plenty of time to have recovery days in between each run. And also one of the days, I think after the long run, he has 2 days of rest and recovery. So that basically, when you run 3 days a week, builds in plenty of time for your joints, muscles, everything to adapt to the training and recover better. So I decided to go with that since he's a newer runner. I also don't know what he was used to running before, so I'm assuming at least a mile probably. And I'm assuming that he probably also has ran 3 miles before at some point. And so that's where I'm starting him in this first week. Right, so somewhere throwing in mileage that he's already hopefully comfortable with. And we'll see, obviously this can be adjusted, but I would say even for a brand new beginner, this is pretty safe territory, anywhere from the 2 to 3 mile range, especially when you have recovery days after each run. So that's the first thing, is just you want to basically start out slow, start out with volume that you're comfortable with, and slowly build your way up from there. So as you can see, we can just start going down the weeks here. So as he starts getting more into the training, I have a couple of things calculated here. So for example, the weekly mileage increase. So what that is doing is basically taking the previous week dividing it, basically taking the weekly mileage from the current week, dividing it by the previous week, and then subtracting 1 to see how much you increased your weekly mileage from the previous week. So general rule of thumb, especially if you're a beginner or newer to running, is you don't want to increase more than 10% per week in the weekly mileage unless you've hit that mileage before very comfortably for a longer period of time. So if you're a newer runner, you don't have to really worry about that. Just try to stick to about 10% every single week. So I know that previously I'm pretty confident he's ran 2 or 3 miles before. So as you can see, this first weekly mileage increase is 20%, which technically violates the rule. But when you have a little bit of context, right, you can kind of change things and be smart about it. But over here in the later weeks, as you can see, I'm only increasing his weekly mileage by 10%. And so that's what I would recommend is when you're newer, start with something you're comfortable with and only increase every single week the weekly running volume by 10%. Another thing that I incorporated in his training plan is deload weeks. So especially when you're newer, deload weeks are super important because you're going to start hitting this weekly mileage volume that you've never hit before. And so your muscles and your joints and everything are going to be really nagging you and complaining. And so it's important to give yourself a week to recover those things while also simultaneously not really losing any sort of effective fitness. And so for this training plan, basically I try to nail it in every 3 weeks, or I'm sorry, every fourth week of the training block. So you have 3 weeks where you're increasing mileage by hopefully 10% or less. And then by the 4th week, you are dramatically dropping the mileage in a deload week, so in order for you to recover. And so that's what you're seeing here. So he's increasing his weekly mileage, goes from 8 to 10 to 11 to 12, and we drop back down to 7 miles in the week so you can recover muscles, joints, everything. And then we go right back to it the following week, going with 4, 4, and 6 miles for a total of 14. And as you can see, some of the calculations here look really high, but that's because we're coming off of a deload week. That's totally fine to, go back into the mileage you've done before after a deload week. You don't have to increase 10% and wait multiple weeks, right? So that's what's happening here. But then as you can see, less than 10%. Here it's a little higher, 13%. And when you're making a training plan, you don't have to follow the rule 100% exactly. You don't have to do exactly 10%. It's just when you go a little bit over, you're just increasing the risk. And so when you give yourself a time constraint, 3 months, got to do half marathon, then a couple of times you're going to go past that 10% rule, and that's okay. You just have to listen to your body, and if you're feeling a lot of pain, you can always dial back to more of that 10% increase. But for now, there's a 13% for this week. And then again, that's 1, 2, 3 weeks of increasing mileage. And now we have another deload week. We do 2, 3, and 4 miles. And yada, yada, yada. So for a half marathon plan, myself, and I would recommend for beginners too, you might as well go away and work your way all the way up to a full half marathon distance in your long run, because it's not super long distance anyways. I mean, yes, 13 miles is a lot for most people, but it's not like it's going to take you 6 hours out of your day, right, as a beginner to go run it. So I recommend that it's kind of like that sweet spot where you might as well in your training go to that full distance just so you can experience what it feels like, and then after that go into a taper and then into your race. The taper is a classic part of any sort of half marathon training plan where you lower mileage, not as much as a deload week, you lower it by a little bit less so that you're giving your body and muscles and joints time to recover while still keeping fitness high. And then the week of the race, you decrease the mileage a lot until the actual race, and then you go all out on race day. That's what we have here. And so I have him set up doing RPE training, as you can see here. So there's a couple different training methodologies. I made a different video on it, but in my experience, RPE is the best way for a beginner to get into running. It's the most common sense way to do it. And that way, hopefully he's not overthinking heart rate and stuff like that. From here, we have some notes that I'd like to go over so you guys can kind of see the thought process. So, I won't get into every single thing here, but I'll kind of like to try to do a quick summary. And so, like I said before, having him doing RPE training, the first thing that I stress, because we're in Florida, he's from Florida, we're in Florida right now. First thing I stressed is fueling. Fueling is super, super important. I cannot stress it enough. Like, especially when you're starting to go to 13 miles of continuous running in Florida, in the Florida heat in summer, fueling is essential. Most important thing for your fueling is water and electrolytes, hands down. So the first thing I recommend is that he gets a runner's water bottle, like a handheld carry. That's what I use. It's the most convenient. You could also plan your route, so you can split it up in short increments and then come back home, drink water, go back out. That's another way to do it if you don't like carrying a water bottle. I just like basically going out there, getting it all done, and then coming back. So I carry a water bottle. You do you. But so I have that there. And then the fueling. So water, super, super important. Do I have an exact number that beginners or anybody should drink? No. I usually just start out with like, okay, whatever a full bottle of water is, try to drink that before your run with a scoop of electrolytes and carbs. And then during the run, if you're out there for hour and a half, 2 hours, bring additional water with you and also electrolytes to make sure that you don't get yourself dehydrated and get heat stroke and things like that. So I recommended him some electrolytes, some carb mix. Also, another thing that's not as important but still pretty important is carbs during the run. So you want to make sure that you're fueling your run with carbs pre and during the run, because basically carbs are your muscle's fuel source, your main fuel source when you're running. So if you're not replenishing the glycogen, the carbs in your body, then you basically are increasing the risk of yourself bonking, and that like lowers your training effectiveness, right? So if you are training with gels, right, and you get used to that, and then you come to race day and you train with gels as well, you can have a much better race because your glycogen stores will be topped off during the whole thing. Another thing that I highly stress is to every single long run, especially for a beginner, is to plan out your fueling, right? So what do you need? You need water, electrolytes, and gels. You need to do pre-run. If you know it's going to be warm, you know it's going to be hot, humid, windy, etc. Make sure that, again, you plan your fuel before the run. So you need water, electrolytes, and carbs. And so pre-run, you can have a bottle of water with a scoop of electrolytes. Make sure that there's plenty of sodium in there. The one that I use has like 800 milligrams, so try to have somewhere around there. Pre-run, also carbs. So starting out, pre-run, if you have 25 to 30 grams of carbs, that's awesome. And then also make sure that during the run, if you know you're going to be out there over an hour, carry water, carry electrolytes, and you can also carry gels. Anywhere from 20-25 grams of carbs is perfect, and take them approximately like every 30 minutes after, say, 45 minutes to an hour. If you start taking them every 30 minutes, that can be super ideal. So yeah, fueling, I cannot stress this enough, is like super, super important. Make sure you take that seriously as a beginner, because it can really come back to haunt you if you're on a long run and you're not taking fueling seriously. So another thing that I stress for like a beginner, like somebody new to running, is get a really good supportive pair of daily trainers for running. So I have a few listed here. Like my favorites are like Gel Gayanos, the Brook Glycerin, and the Brooks Adrenalines. These are all really great options for a really nice supportive daily trainer shoe. And then here I go into basically like all of the weekly mileage notes. So for a beginner, the first training block, that first 3 weeks, should just all be easy miles, getting your body used to running consistently and increasing the mileage. And then after that, I give him some speed work. So we start out with some tempo runs where basically I want the RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, to be a 6 or a 7. So in other words, like, he's going to have a difficult time talking, but it's a pace that he can hold for a moderate amount of mileage, anywhere from 3 to 5 miles. So that's kind of like what you're trying to aim for as a beginner when you're trying to incorporate some workouts. Before that, when you're just doing easy pace, your RPE should be really low, meaning that you should be able to run that distance and it should feel easy, and you should be able to have a full conversation without having to stutter or stop too much to breathe or stuff like that. And then as we go along here, later in the training block, or later in the training, I have him doing some long run workouts. So this is a mistake that I did in my initial races where I didn't really incorporate long run workouts, but I feel like those now are like the most important because those are the closest thing to simulating race day. So if you don't include long run workouts as a beginner, you should, because they will help you reach your race time goal a lot. It'll help guarantee that you reach your race time goal if you have one set. So included some of those, and also some interval workouts. So you can look up interval workouts. If you have a Garmin as well, you can also program that into your watch. They're awesome, but tempo runs are also really awesome. What it comes down to is you just want to hit different zones in your training, right? So you want to have some really high intense stuff, right, but lower volume. You want to have some tempo, some moderate intensity, moderate amount of volume, and then you want to have your bulk of your volume be easy stuff, aerobic base building, if you want to go long distance. And yeah, I also included strength training into his regimen, so I'm not sure if he's doing that now, but as a beginner, for any beginners out there, you should most definitely be strength training if you want to avoid overuse injuries. But do you have to? Absolutely not. You can just be a pure runner and just have fun with that if your strength training is not really your thing. But just be warned that you may be more prone to overuse injuries. So I would highly, highly recommend that anybody who's taking running more seriously and want to go longer distance should strength train. Okay, another thing I want to stress is to also make sure that you're following the 80-20 rule. So as a beginner runner, when you're starting out, 100% of your runs should be easy. But after that first training block, you can start to slowly incorporate some speed work. And I would just want to stress that to make sure that you follow 80-20 rule. So 80% of your weekly mileage should still be easy. So that's a vast majority of it. And then 20% or less should be like your high intensity stuff. Right now, obviously take this with a grain of salt, right? The exact number doesn't actually matter. As long as you're in the ballpark, that's what matters. And most importantly is to listen to your body. That is why you train RPE, right? Like, you want to listen to your body, and if you're doing the high intensity and you're constantly feeling sore and injured, dial it back, right? It's way more worth you just staying consistent. Like, you're going to grow way more if you stay consistent with the running, and instead of trying to incorporate too much speed work early on and then injuring yourself and then not being able to stay consistent, if that makes sense. So as a beginner, like, I'd much rather have them focusing primarily on easy aerobic stuff that's low impact, low intensity, that you're less likely to get injured, and stay ultra consistent, than have them do too much speed work. Now, I will admit that speed work, like, is how you grow, it's how you get faster, but that can be incorporated slowly so your body can adjust to it. That way you can stay consistent with the running. And the last thing I'd like to stress to new people is, like, pick a race. Like, this person, Jay, has not personally picked a race, but I recommend if you're gonna do a half marathon, like, pick a race straight from the start, sign up for it, pay for it, commit to it. That way you kind of like hold yourself accountable, and you kind of like have that little thing in the back of your head, like, hey, I already paid for this, I already have skin in the game, so you go through with it. But yeah, other than that, that's it. Quick little video just talking through how I would make a beginner training plan. If you guys want to see more videos like this, or if you want me to make you a training plan, let me know in the comments. And yeah, I'll see y'all later. Peace.